Africa is on the fast road to economic progress. At the destination is a burgeoning information and knowledge economy driven by financial inclusion and socio-economic advancement. Powering this progress is Ascend Digital Solutions, an award-winning digital transformation company that is reimagining digital for Africa. Ascend is accelerating progress in Africa's underserved regions and bridging the digital divide by charting a powerful digital roadmap underpinning economic growth, blending strong, innovative capabilities with financial and technology expertise, enhancing existing digital infrastructure to accelerate digital prosperity, and promoting diverse programs that drive localized and meaningful connectivity on the continent. We are rapidly becoming a representative of Africa's true digital sovereignty. Our rural wireless network program is providing data and voice services to 3.4 million citizens in rural Ghana. We are offering neutral, shared, digital platforms, mobile applications, and security services that empower MNOs and government enterprises. Our joint venture, Digital Infrastructure Ventures, is enabling the delivery of our e-transformation solutions through high-speed wireless broadband, 4G, 5G services steered by a super information highway with 100 gigabits per second backbone, secure SD-WAN solutions that accelerate time to market, and express connectivity of 50 to 100 megabits per second connecting metropolitan and district assemblies, post offices, hospitals, and the police service. Ascend Digital Solutions is setting up high-capacity, seamless, and secure nationwide broadband infrastructure that will drive entrepreneurship and a high-skilled economy. We are creating tremendous opportunities in next-generation technologies, which will enable the delivery of robotics, autonomous driving, artificial intelligence, and machine learning. Ascend's digital infrastructure subsidiary, Smart Infraco, is a technical partner of the National Information Technology Agency under the Ministry of Communications and Digitalization, Ghana. We are redefining the state of digital play in Ghana by bringing seamless connectivity to Ghana's public institutions and agencies, helping MNOs and ISPs deliver advanced data and voice services by leveraging the Government of Ghana's world-class digital infrastructure backbone. Tier 3 data center with secondary backup, disaster recovery, and low latency. Over 1,000 kilometers of fiber optic cabling along the eastern corridor of Ghana. The largest government-built WAN infrastructure supported by Metro Fiber and nationwide 4G LTE TDD 2.6 GHz FWA, providing high-speed broadband connectivity, managed IT infrastructure services, cloud and cybersecurity solutions. Ascend Digital Solutions and Smart Infraco are enabling next-generation technologies in Africa, with Ghana as the digital playground. We are building a booming African economy and closing in on the vision of holistic digital empowerment. Join us as we unlock the full potential of digital technologies and transform Africa into the world's largest digital economy.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Today, we'll be talking about 5G, 6G, and beyond for a one connected Africa. Over the past 2.5 decades, we've seen an evolution in technology. We started with 3G, a decade later, 4G came into place, and about 6 years later, 5G came into place. And this has been a game changer. We had the likes of South Korea, China, and USA launching, and the Europe picked up. And in Africa, about 15 countries currently have 5G, and a lot more expected this year and beyond. So today, as we discuss 5G and 6G and beyond for a one connected Africa, we have three persons who are going to lead us in this discussion and tell us what we need to do to make sure Africa experiences this digital revolution. I would like to introduce these persons at this moment. The first person is Kenichi Okeleke. Kenichi has been an ICT industry analyst for more than 15 years, leading research across a wide range of topics, including 5G, AI, fintech, and telecoms policy. He's the lead author for GSMA's flagship Mobile Economy and Digital Societies series. Kenichi speaks regularly at industry events and provides media commentary on key issues within the digital ecosystem. Kenichi currently works with GSMA as a senior director for GSMA Intelligence. Kenichi, you're welcome.
Thank you so much, Thomas. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Our next panelist is Mike Taitlin. Mike is a seasoned innovator and technical executive with over 3 decades of expertise in engineering management across mobile, satellite, and optical industries. With leadership roles at Motorola and Hughes Network Systems, he later pioneered ventures in optical technology at Sealight. Mike is co-founder of GlobalBit, now OneWeb, a low Earth orbit broadband constellation which was acquired by Google. He joined Facebook, where he focused on connectivity initiatives, and in 2022, he was awarded the Best Network Technology Prize by the Wireless Broadband Alliance for Automated Frequency Coordination System, which has been adopted globally. In 2023, Mike left Facebook and joined NextGen Infraco, where he's a Chief Technology Officer. Mike, you're welcome.
Thank you, Thomas, for this introduction, and looking forward to this discussion with the honorable panelists.
Great, thank you. Our third speaker, and I'm excited because for the first time we have a female panelist for our webinars. She is Thelma Quay, and she has over 18 years experience working within telecom, ICT, and banking in various capacities. She is engaged with governments in Africa to make the transition to a digital economy by providing support and guidance so that they can make the most of the opportunities that the digital economy can bring. She is committed to helping African countries create a more prosperous future, ensuring that their citizens can benefit from the advancements in technology. Thelma currently works with Smart Africa Secretariat as the Chief Digital Infrastructure, Skills, and Gender. Thelma, you're welcome.
Thank you, Thomas, and thank you for having me. Hello to the fellow panelists.
Thank you. Welcome all. And today we'll have a guest speaker, which we usually don't have. I'll introduce this person later, but for now, we'll go into a panel discussion. And for our audience, what I'd like you to do is, if you have any questions, you can just note it down in the comment section. And after discussions, and then the guest speaker has his session, we'll go through the questions and our panelists will address all the questions. Okay? Thank you. So, Thelma, I think let's start with you. So we've heard of 2G, 3G, 4G, and now we have 5G. So how does 5G differ from all these previous technologies?
Thank you, Thomas. So I'm going to use the analogy of transportation to explain so everybody can understand. So imagine that we want to travel from Accra to Tamale, right? And I'll start with the first technology being 1G. So 1G would be like you want to walk from Accra to Tamale. You can do it, but it's not very efficient. You'll be tired. You can't also carry so many people with you. It's just yourself that you would be carrying. Then we then came 2G, right? And let's say 2G would be riding a bicycle between Accra and Tamale. Again, it's much more efficient than walking, but then you can carry one more person. And 2G came with edge service, where we were able to access some sort of data service at the time. Then we came to 3G. I would compare 3G to a car, your sedan car, where you can also carry maybe three more people in addition to you, the driver. Again, moving between Accra and Tamale is much more faster in a car than walking or on a bicycle. And then you can also carry three more people with you. So with 3G, we were able to do more. We could do emails. I remember when we launched our first 3.5 G in Ghana, we're so excited at what we could do. We could do email, you could browse, you could do some sort of streaming. Then we go to 4G, right? 4G, uh, um, I will compare 4G with a high speed train. The high speed train is really fast, it's much more efficient. You can carry so many other people and passengers. Again, with the 4G, there's high speed internet, there's seamless streaming of very high definition videos, there's online gaming. You can download things very, very quickly. So, this is the analogy with the 4G. Now we come to 5G, and I want to compare that with a jet plane. You know how a jet plane is fast. So it's like flying a jet plane. It's fast. It's the most advanced mode of transportation we have now. And so at this moment that we are speaking, 5G is also the most advanced form of telecom that we have. It's capable. A jet plane can connect to different parts of the world very quickly, and so is 5G. 5G has ultra fast speeds, the latency, and latency means the speed at which the packets travel from one point to the other. So latency is very, very low. And so we can use it for almost real time scenarios, for instance. And that is the analogy. So 5G, for now, it represents a significant leap in our technology compared to what we had in 4G, in 3G, in 2G. And there are a lot of use cases for 5G, like education, like healthcare. For instance, at Smart Africa, we are thinking, how can we leverage technology to spread education? And we are thinking, how about augmented reality? How about virtual reality? And at the base of this is 5G and probably 6G. The good thing is that 5G is also catching up very quickly. We used to think that it will stay in the pilot phase for a long time, but it's really catching up, and we have quite about 3 million connections or subscriptions at the moment in Africa, which is quite impressive, and it's going to catch up really quickly than 3G or 4G. So I'll end here, Thomas, and deliberate a bit more when we go around.
Thank you for that, Thelma. So 5G comes with speed. So now we can do things almost in real time. I'm sure most of us will know the experience we had with 3G, where you have a lot of buffering, trying to stream stuff, and you couldn't even connect to the internet properly, and all the
That,
frustrations that can be 3G. But now all that is gone with 5G, and
so that's the latency part. Yeah.
it's interesting that you mentioned that there are about 3 million connections currently in Africa. That's people connected to 5G. And earlier on in the video, we noticed that about 16 countries have 5G, have rolled out 5G in Africa. So then this brings me to my next question. I think, Kenichi, you are with GSMA, so you can help us with that. So what do you think are the challenges that's affecting 5G deployment in Africa? Because I mean, it came about around 2018, 19, thereabout. Europe has moved to 5G, America, some countries in Asia, but it seems to be a bit slow on our side of the world. What are the challenges you've seen in Africa?
Yeah, thank you so much, Thomas. If I just start by building a little bit on the very good foundation Thomas has laid for us, as to how 5G differs from previous technology. One important thing to also note is that 5G, is the first of these generations that is very well suited to enterprise solutions, to enterprise services. So the first four generations, 1G, 2G, 3G, 4G, are primarily focused on communications, mainly, person-to-person communications. But 5G brings in the speed we talked about, low latency, a whole lot of new capabilities that make it very well suited for enterprise services. So, 5G has really opened that opportunity for, telecoms connectivity to play a bigger role in enabling new, operational models within different enterprises, from manufacturing to agriculture to healthcare and the rest of it. To your question on challenges in Africa, I think we can look at it in two ways: a demand side problem and a supply side problem. Let's start with the supply side problem. So here we're looking at building the networks, operators, what operators can do or should do to build out 5G networks. The first thing to note is that 5G technology rollout is capital intensive. We can't run away from that fact. It costs a lot, to build the network. To be able to achieve the speeds, capacity, and low latency that 5G promises, we need to extensively densify the networks beyond what we have for 3G and 4G. That means, building more cell sites within the same area, and this costs a lot of money. So for operators in Africa, there is that challenge to first obviously upgrade their legacy networks to IP networks. There is that challenge to build out the 5G networks, to deploy 5G infrastructure around the country. But beyond the operators, beyond what's in their control, they also face challenges on issues that ordinarily should have been external to them. One of those issues is power. We all know that across many countries in Africa, access to grid, to the grid, outside of the urban areas is very patchy. And even in the urban areas where there is supposed to be, access to the grid, service is also poor. So what that means is that operators have to face the additional costs of looking for new ways to power their networks, either through generators, which cost a lot of money to buy the generators, or the diesel to run those generators, or we're beginning to see solutions around solar. So when you put all of this together, you have that supply side issue. And then when you come to the demand side issue, this is where we now begin to see the readiness of the consumer, their ability to afford certain types of services. So if we're already saying that building 5G, is expensive, and of course, if you think about 5G devices, they are not cheap. The average selling price of a 5G smartphone is still many times more expensive than the average selling price of a 4G smartphone. So you then have that issue, that we've got this huge population across Africa, over a billion people, but realistically, what proportion of that population will be able to afford 5G services? So the demand side problem and the supply side problem then creates a challenge around the business case, the 5G business case. Okay, how then do you join that dot? How then do you address that 5G business case challenge? I think that is the question that will definitely be on the minds of stakeholders across Africa, and by that I mean operators, policymakers, equipment vendors, infrastructure providers, device OEMs. Everyone's going to be, thinking about how do we bridge that, divide between, the supply side realities, the demand side realities, in order to create a sustainable business model for 5G services in Africa.
Okay. Thank you, Kenichi. So that's quite interesting because yes, that's true. Because even with current 4G, I mean, you still have the challenges on the demand side, people being able to afford the devices actually connect to 4G and experience what 4G offers. So then with 5G being faster, of course, there are more devices, more enhanced devices, which comes at a huge cost. But also, I noticed that you mentioned that the earlier generations, 1G to 3G, and even 4G, are focused more on peer-to-peer connections, where 5G is more well suited for enterprise solutions, which means that for businesses in the mining, the energy sector, break,
Yeah.
can now do a lot more and provide more data sets using 5G.
Yeah.
Which is great.
Yeah,
Also,
absolutely. And just on that point, if that's okay, I think that is something that provides a lot of opportunity for Africa. If we, as I just mentioned, on the consumer side, there may be that challenge of affordability, which could affect the widespread adoption of the technology in the short term, at least. But then the ability of 5G to enable new services in the enterprise segment then creates opportunities for operators, to target that segment. Okay.
okay.
And of course, that segment will be better able, to afford those services, and that will certainly improve, the business case for 5G deployment in the region.
And thereby you enhance adoption. Okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, so on that's one side, the demand side, but I think that this other side where just a supply where it's capital intensive, and Mike, you've worked with Facebook and you're currently next gen, so we know that 5G is capital intensive. People have power supply issues, which comes at additional costs. So currently, how do you think telecoms are funding their 5G infrastructure investments? Because Africa needs to move at a fast pace to catch up with the world. So looking at the African landscape, how do you think they are funding their investments?
That's a very good question. So, as the previous speaker said, 5G is definitely picking up. And by 2027, 2028, it will be a dominant technology worldwide. I think the Ericsson report said that by 2028, 5G subscribers will be the equivalent of 60% of the world population, which is, going to be on par or even exceed the 4G use. And at the same time, the Ericsson report predicted that 80% of users in Europe will use 5G services. But in Africa, uptick is rather slow. And even there are a lot of examples that governments urgently make more 5G spectrum available, or they provide a flexible rules where the 4G spectrum can be used for 5G. Ericsson reports predict that, but about the same time, it will be only 10% of the population covered by 5G. So the funding issue is actually quite dominant in this decision. As Kenichi said before me, 5G is a capital expensive deployment. So then the large telco groups obviously financing deployments using the same mechanism as they have done until now, which is a combination of cash from operations and debt instruments. Vendor financing continues to play a big role, but with the recent effective ban on Chinese core equipment and financial challenges in China, this source kind of a bit diminished and lost some relevance. Now, changing the way deployments are executed also play a role. And so now, idea how to reduce the capex even worldwide is important, so the tower sharing has been already used in 4G and the trend is increasing. But in emerging market, particularly in Africa, network sharing will end up being the way to go, in my view, because the balance sheet of the main telco groups can't afford this capital expenditures and a comprehensive infra rollout for 5G. So the ability for the local operators, even for the very incumbent ones, to fund and even from their ongoing operations or from other debt mechanisms will be very challenging. And so the sharing of the equipment is going to grow extensively between the operators and the newcomers to the market. This is already a reality through a national roaming agreement. where each operator holds a region deployment and the roam on each other network. However, it will maximize capital efficiency and reduce cost of production, allowing operators to offer a high-quality product and at the same time provide affordable prices, because costs are everything, especially the costs in Africa, which, as the previous speaker said, they actually the main barrier of entry and use the 5G services is moving to an open access network, in my view, where there's an independent party building a state of the art infrastructure that sells on wholesale to the MNOs. That's the only way to share the costs between multiple operators and guarantee equal access to the broader consumer base and enterprise base to the 5G infrastructure, and find the best business models that would allow the extensive deployment in Africa. So this wireless open access networks on neutral hosts, on network as a service deployments, in my view, will be an important mechanism that ensures capital efficiency, deliver high quality products and at affordable prices. It's hard to imagine that there will be 4 or 5 operators that all can roll in the same country a competitive 5G service, and that will be obviously cost prohibitive. But at the same time, there's a real need why consumers are asking for 5G. And so one way to do it, in my view, is by extensive sharing, either as the as the RAN infrastructure, as the towers, or maybe even closely integrating the core networks. So in my view, this is where the trend will go in Africa, to reduce the funding requirements, and probably is going to be the best way to reduce the burden on 5G deployments on the MNO balance sheets, improving the service at the same time, and overall roll out the 5G services faster, because I think Ericsson report is very gloomy. As Thelma said, and Kinechi before me said, Africa actually has needs for 5G. There are a lot of use for that, especially with the fixed wireless access, given a role to the private networks and industries to flourish. But obviously the ability to fund this project is what remains at stake here, and reducing the cost of that, which I envision can be done through the shared parts of the ecosystems, I think will speed up this 5G deployments in Africa.
Thank you, Michael. I think it's interesting that Ericsson said in 2028, which is just 4 years away, 60% of the world's population will be 5G subscribers, which will be far more than even 4G or 3G has achieved. So that alone shows the potential that 5G has to basically transform our lives. But then it's interesting what you said about the open access network, because we're used to every network operator building their own infrastructure, taking a lot of time to invest and roll out infrastructure. And I think that is part of the reason why even 4G has taken so long to pick up. And it's quite interesting that with a shared infrastructure, it makes it easier and lowers the cost for rolling out infrastructure, and it makes it more competitive for everybody to just plug in and provide service to their customers. So that's quite interesting. And I believe there are some countries. Sorry, Mike, are there any countries that are currently doing that model globally?
So worldwide, there are a number of examples where the countries trying to do it. I think obviously Malaysia come in mind. There was example in Mexico. There are a few examples in Africa as well. So I think the model is still evolving, and next gen infracore, and we can talk about that, is a new network as a service provider of 5G and 4G services in Ghana, which is supposed to be deployed this year. So the model will be will come to fruition, because there is absolutely the need to have something done differently. Otherwise, if Ericsson report is right, and I hope it's not, Africa by 2028 will be trailing Europe and US by 70%. which is that's what they predict. Only 10% of 5G uptake in Africa versus 80% in Europe and US. So there is definitely a demand in Africa. Fixed wireless access is absolutely must. People want to enjoy broadband video. They want to enjoy gaming. They want to enjoy telehealth and remote education. There's absolutely the need to consume that amount of capacity. So the model will be, it's still early days, but the reason that we have all these models coming to fruition is because they actually address the real need. And the real need is what obviously dictates the market approach. So I think as there are some examples, I think we'll see more examples coming worldwide, especially in the developing world, to tackle the real problem of bringing 5G to the market faster.
Okay. Right. Thank you, Michael. So, I mean, the shared network is the way to go to accelerate our pace in Africa, so that we don't lag behind. So, on that note, I mean, Thelma, you have been engaged in a lot of African countries in your line of work. So, are there any specific regions or cities in Africa that are leading the way in 5G adoption?
Absolutely. We have South Africa that is leading currently with about 40% of the population covered with 5G. There's also Nigeria, there's Kenya. There are other countries like I think Uganda, there's also Malawi, but most of these countries are also looking at it from an industrial perspective. And I just wanted to mention that definitely 5G is a key game changer for Africa. But we need to pivot the way we look at it. We cannot treat 5G the way we have treated 4G, 3G, or 2G, especially in the area of spectrum, right? If regulators are going to price it so highly, we'll continue to increase the digital divide, because 5G is going to be so expensive again, and people cannot afford the service, and only that 10%. And if we remain with the way we are working, that's we will end up at the 10%. But then we can also decide as a continent to pivot the way we look at it, right? How about the regulators looking at the spectrum as something that will help for digital inclusion, which will eventually add on to the GDP of the country, and so they stagger the payment instead of quoting very outrageous prices for ISPs, for instance. That's one part. There's also the part where we need to look at 5G. For me, 5G is an opportunity to leverage technology to industrialize Africa. If we continue again to look at it from the perspective of a B2C service, that is where we are going to end up at that 10% by 2028. But let's look at it for something that we can leverage for our B2B. How do we leverage, for instance, 5G for precision agriculture? How do we leverage, for instance, 5G for health, for telemedicine, so that for our mothers in the remote places who are dying because of childbirth, we are able to import healthcare services via 5G, for instance. So if probably the governments and the regulators also pivoted the way they look at it as something that is that will culminate in the future to the GDPs of the country, I think the cost, we can also help the cost to come down. We've already heard about the fact that because of the frequency ranges, a lot more sites has to be put in place, and then that means a lot more costs. But we also need to look at how do we support these organizations to now start from a lower, how do we lower the barrier cost, the cost of entry, so that they are able to afford the implementation, and they're able to give the service basically. So in terms of the cities, yes, I've mentioned, and we do have the potential again to grow to about 140 million subscriptions. But for me, 140 million out of 1.4 billion is too small, and that's the 10% that has been spoken about. So we need to do something. That's what, from the Smart Africa perspective, we've been working on supporting our regulators on how they can manage this. We know that it's tight because some of these regulators also look at it as a source of revenue for the country. But then we need to be able to, our job here is to be able to convince them that getting $1 today, if you staggered it, you might get $100 in 5 years' time, for instance, per spectrum that you have allocated. So that's the kind of mindset that we are trying to preach, so that we can go beyond that 10% that has been spoken about. The other thing is also even the spectrum availability. Africa is 2G and 3G heavy, and most of the spectrum that we want to use for 5G is locked up in our 2G. A number of our users are using phones that can only access 2G service. How do we switch off? I mean, a lot of these continents that we have spoken about, Europe, US, most of them have switched off 2G. They've sunset 2G. Now, how are we ready to shut down our 2G so we can make way for that spectrum that 5G can use? It requires a lot of regulatory consensus. It requires a lot of strategy. Also, it requires a lot of stakeholder engagement and the government understanding that $10 or $100 in 5 years would be better than $1 today, because every other citizen would be empowered to also participate in the digital economy, because we would have reduced the cost barrier, would have been able to also give them access to cheaper 5G devices and all those things. So it's a lot of things that we need to do for us to cross that 10% mark. I believe that we shouldn't be satisfied with that 10%. And I think this is a good call for us to sit around the table with our regulators, our policymakers, to let them know that, look, if you don't do this, we are going to be widening the gap even more.
I totally agree with you. I mean, Africa, the 10%, is not good. We need to work and make sure it's not just 10% who are connected to 5G. You did mention about the mindset change from a regulatory and policy perspective, where we look at how we allocate the 5G, the spectrum, instead of looking at the cash value we're getting today. We should look at the opportunity we can get from that if we stagger the payments over a period. And that has been the case in a lot of countries where they just sell the spectrum and nothing actually moves on. But then on that, I know Kenichi, with GSMA, you guys are into a lot of regulatory and policy stuff. So how do you think regulatory bodies should approach a 5G spectrum allocation and the licensing?
Yeah, no, thanks, Thomas. And again, Thomas has built a solid foundation on this, and she's absolutely spot on the need for that mindset change. This is 2024. If you think back to about 10 years ago, early 2010s, with the emergence of 3G, 4G, spectrum auctions, we saw countries all around the world, selling spectrum at very high, rates and all that. At that point, there was still a lot of growth to be had in voice. There was still a lot of growth to be had in data. But now in 2024, we're already seeing, both voice and even data in many markets become really saturated. And so the point now, shouldn't be to make the most out of the spectrum sales, okay, as Thelma has, very well pointed out, but rather it should be looking at spectrum as a resource, okay, that can generate value for the economy, for the society over the long term. So that, should be, the approach, especially when it comes to spectrum pricing. But beyond spectrum pricing, a very, very important point to note for Africa as a whole is tech neutrality, technology neutrality. And this is the ability, for operators to refarm existing spectrum holdings for different technologies. We have an important role in helping, governments or rather countries elsewhere, Europe, Asia, the US, we've seen this help to ease the migration from 2G to 3G and behind when it comes to tech neutrality. And and we think this is an issue that really needs to be addressed, because what it means is for an operator that has spectrum in certain bands, let's say some bands, they should be able to refarm that spectrum to 4G and even 5G services based on Thomas, how should regulators in Africa approach the issue of spectrum? Importantly, spectrum shouldn't be seen, as a cash cow that should be milked to the maximum, but rather it should be seen as an important resource that can be used to generate a lot of economic wealth in the future, by supporting operators, to roll out services, which then, as we talked about earlier, can become the engine room, for the manufacturing sector, for the education sector, for the agriculture sector, for the automotive sector, you name it, healthcare, to generate economic value. And secondly, tech neutrality is very vital. If there is still, any country out there where full tech neutrality has not been implemented, it is very important, that they take steps to implement this, so that operators within, those countries, as they see demand for data increase, it gives them that flexibility to then begin to refarm their existing spectrum holdings to higher technologies, 4G and 5G technologies, to meet the growing demand, for data services.
Well, that's quite interesting, because in a lot of African countries, we look at the spectrum as a cash cow, as you rightly said. There's been some controversies in countries where governments has tried to shift from that approach, but then most people see it as a cash cow, revenue for the government, for national development, etc. But then the key is we're looking at the spectrum being a resource to generate value further down the line over the years to come. And as you rightly said, there should be tech neutrality, because now if you have a 2G equipment, 2G technology, how do you refarm that to use for 4G, 5G? That also actually adds to the reduction in costs. And on the cost note, I know Michael, you touched on the fact that using an open access shared infrastructure helps reduce the costs. Now, yes, a lot of country operators or countries are looking for ways to get investments for their infrastructure, etc. But then, looking at you from where you sit, are there any public-private partnerships that can help provide innovative and sustainable financial solutions, and that we can explore in the development of 5G infrastructure?
Yes, that's a good question. But first, I would like to follow what Telma and Nesh is saying, because they brought a really good answers to this question. So the costs are absolutely the main barrier for to grow the 10% that we just discussed to be in line with maybe even what Europe and US. And so reduction of cost is absolutely critical. With Africa is a large population of 1.4 billion, but fragmented in 54 countries. The organization like Smart Africa and GSMA playing is absolutely important, is bringing the unity into the harmonization of the spectrum and regulatory regulatory needs, and also the industry practices that can be easily adopted by various countries. That is, I think, is very, very important. And that's also important for the questions that you mentioned about the private-public partnership, because there has to be a right combination of multiple ingredients. There's a real need to find that combination, because, as I said previously, I don't see any other way not like to go forward and increase the penetration of 5G without sharing the equipment to reduce the costs. It was number of attempts in both mature and emerging market, but execution of those have been a challenge, because there are multiple stakeholders, and the ingredients have to be cooked just right to find a solution that works in a larger, across various countries, especially in Africa. And in my view, we also need to have government support, both from industry and a treasury perspective, meaning that, as Thelma and Kinecia said, government cannot see just spectrum as the cash cow to milk it. Industry cannot see that as the kind of a transit event that they have to just be very shy in buying into that. And so government support is very important here. There must be regulatory endorsements. So putting together clear and consistent rules on the way to license, and also, these rules have to be championed for GSMA and Smart Africa and maybe such organizations to harmonize it across multiple countries, because it's hard to envision that every country may come up with regulation of their own that will be conducive to broader deployment across Africa. So this organization that tie together various administrations are very important. So the industry players, where they see the private partnership or network as a service or any form of sharing network as an enabler and not as a challenger. And that was very challenging to find, because often the initiative that would start as a shared network would be looked by the operators as a competitive product and would not use them. I think ultimately it was a failure for both the shared networks in the past, in some cases, but also for MNOs, because the resulting outcome is obviously there. The penetration of 5G in Africa is trailing behind the developed countries, and the competition is not there. So obviously financial institutions have to provide the right amount of capital, as I touched previously about the funding, and the technology providers. The network should be, the cost of the 5G should come down. The technology itself should be very easy to adopt for both, if we talk 5G, where it's initially going to the non-standalone, and then they easily transfer to standalone, or use the combination of both, depending on the business case. And all the other infra players, towers and fiber, should work together to ensure the service of the quality and the time to market. So I think finding these ingredients and work them together is a critical, to work side by side with other models, more traditional ones, to change the, to accelerate the deployment of 5G in Africa and actually, bring the services that really necessary. So I'm still hopeful that working through multiple mechanisms, including private-public partnerships, will considerably accelerate the penetration and growth of the 5G services in Africa beyond what Ericsson predicted.
All right, thank you, Michael. So, as you said, PPP should be private-public partnership, should be seen as an enabler, which is something that in most cases we tend not to see. We find both the government side and then the industry players sort of going at each other rather than working together and having that collaboration to make sure there's a partnership and there's a right mix of key partners to make sure this works. And you made another key point here where I believe, luckily we have both Kenichi and Toma here, where policy makers such as yourself should be involved in terms of harmonizing the rules across Africa, because if we want Africa to leapfrog, we need to make sure there's a coordinated effort across board to make sure that we leapfrog. There are some works that are going on in some countries. We could look at that, see how we can replicate across the other countries. I know Smart Africa does a good job of bringing the countries together to collaborate on this. So that's a good point. Where GSMA's Smart Africa can help harmonize things across Africa. But Michael, still staying on you. So I mean, we've spoken about investment, the regulatory bodies. We look at countries that are leading their way in 5G adoption in Ghana, in Africa. So what are some of the use cases of 5G technology, and what are some of the tangible benefits that 5G brings? I know Thelma roughly touched on the health bit, but if you can expand on that, what are some of the use cases and the tangible benefits that it brings to average consumers and to businesses and the country as a whole?
So obviously the high cost of the 5G phones is probably the main barrier today for the broad use of the mobile services. And the scale of the 5G is, I think, is the critical, and as I say, the harmonized regulations as well. The cost of the phones are, very much depends on the quantity of procurement, and so the larger procurements to bring the cost down. But now each operator, bring their own set of phones, and obviously that makes it expensive. If you compare to Reliance in India, which brings hundreds of millions of devices to the market, obviously getting the prices that much lower than what you can buy today in Africa. So scale of the deployment, it's very important. But where we can deploy 5G now is mainly in the fixed wireless access. I think that is the big segment, because Africa doesn't have a big broadband penetration in terms of fiber or in terms of the cable that's present, for example, in the US or Europe. So the big pipes that 5G brings with the massive MIMO technology, that can definitely immediately target the improved remote working, enhanced distant learning, telemedicine, and address also the specific either the enterprise use case, or provide some kind of multi-tenancy on the network. But I think that's where the first uptick will happen. And in parallel, I think as the cost of the device, 5G enabled devices coming down, then there is a mobile EMBB use case will flourish, where basically when people can afford the phone, they can carry with them. And when I'm saying that, it's not just selected people, but as the mass technology. So I see that if the regulations will be harmonized and the technology will be widespread, maybe the organization can champion also maybe coordination within the operators for the device procurement, for handsets, for CPE, and maybe some provide a mechanism where mass buying. Africa has a lot of people, 1.5 billion people. It has a massive buying power. So, but maybe with the help of the common regulations, the procurement, distribution of devices can also be effectively reflecting the price reduction, and obviously with that, people will start benefiting from the EMBB use case, as well as the car distribution, the mining, the agriculture, and obviously the financial services.
Thanks, Michael. So, I mean, 5G would enhance our finance, agri, health sector, which is good to know. But I noticed that there's you also emphasized or touched on the harmonization of policies across board. So I don't know, Kenichi, if we can help with this. Are there any harmonized policies currently across countries in Africa, and which of these policies are in place for 5G deployment?
So I think, when it comes to 5G harmonization, as you had previously mentioned, a number of organizations are working hard, to ensure, that this happens across Africa. Smart Africa are doing a great job. We are the GSMA are also working on that, but I just want to, perhaps maybe call out the Africa Telecoms, Union. They have pretty much been at the forefront of, pushing, for harmonization across, spectrum harmonization, but, across so many other areas that they're working on across Africa, working closely with the AU and other regional bodies. What I would say is that advocacy continues to happen in this area, and there are best practices that we can see across the region, countries that have taken steps to adopt some best practices around spectrum, and as more countries begin to do the same, we will see that harmonization happen across the region. Some of those best practices include things like having a spectrum roadmap. For example, this is something that Smart Africa and the ATU have called out, in many occasions, the need for a spectrum roadmap that provides certainty, for operators as they invest in their networks. And at the GSMA, we have identified, that having a clear roadmap, for up to a couple of decades, provides that clear certainty, for investors and for operators as well. That is definitely one area that we need to see harmonization happen across the region. Other areas, other issues that also need to be addressed. We've talked about tech neutrality earlier on. That is also another area that requires a lot of attention across Africa. I will also want to highlight, the opportunity really for policymakers across the region to learn best practices from other regions, learn from the way countries in other regions, have approached the issue of spectrum to maximize its potential for 5G. There are several countries, the likes of Saudi Arabia, not too far from us, that have adopted policies to drive, to leverage spectrum really to drive economic growth through the deployment of, high-speed networks. I think these are some of the issues, these are some of the lessons that can be learned. But in a nutshell, around spectrum harmonization, I will say that a lot of advocacy is currently ongoing, and the expectation is that more policymakers, will see the need, to harmonize, practices across different issues, from pricing to tech neutrality, to having a clear roadmap, to having a clear broadband policy that outlines, how they intend to develop broadband services within their country, and by so doing, as a whole, Africa will be able to reap the benefits that high-speed technologies such as 5G, bring to society.
And then as countries adopt best practices, also helps in so achieving the harmonization that we expect across the continent. Because once you see what's happening in one country and replicate it in yours, it just moves on from there. So that's a good thing. Thomas, so from your end, what are some of the lessons that as African countries in this space trying to catch up with 5G? What are some of the lessons we can learn from the early adopters of 5G technology?
Thank you. So I believe some of the lessons has already been spoken about. For instance, looking at spectrum as a resource and not as a cash cow. And Saudi Arabia has been able to prove that. You would see a greater digital progress if you don't, put so much effort into making sure that you're extracting too much money upfront from selling spectrum. Other early adopters like South Korea, US, Japan has also looked at tech neutrality, which has been preached. So basically, it's the best practices. If you did tech neutrality, then it's easier, and you don't really have to delay your 5G deployment. Then we also need to do the harmonization. And I just wanted to add a bit to what Kenichi had already said. So at Smart Africa, we've done a 5G regulation guideline. It's a guideline just to help our regulators on how to approach this, so that there's inclusivity in terms of making sure that the end user gains. Now, also, we don't just stop at the policy. We also train these regulators. So we have the Smart Africa Digital Academy, and specifically on 5G, we've collaborated very much with the GSMA, and usually at the sidelines of the Mobile World Congress in Barcelona, in Kigali, we do gather these regulators, and we have several trainings on them, one of them being 5G. And now the next step we want to do is creating a community of practice around 5G. And this is how we are going to make sure that whatever agenda or whatever good practices that we have seen from other regions, we are able to disseminate it, not only disseminate, but follow through, through the roadmaps, through the strategies. But these people who are in the community of practice become sort of the ambassadors within the countries to make sure that we are doing the right thing and we are not increasing the digital divide by still sticking to our old ways. Some of the things that other early adopters have also done is investment in infrastructure. We need to invest in the infrastructure. We cannot, 5G cannot run on the current infrastructure that we have. So we need to be able to call the shots and invest in infrastructure. We need to actually look at a 5G infrastructure like we are looking at schools, like we are looking at hospitals, because it's essential. 5G essentially becomes a utility. So we need to be, when the finance minister is reading the budget, we need to be looking at what is the investment the country is also putting in those digital infrastructure to make sure that we are able to serve properly. Then there's also, well, specifically for Africa, we need to look at our power stability. 5G is power intensive. We need to see how we leverage on sustainable energy to be able to supply, because if we talk about all these investments, all this spectrum, everything, and there's no power, we still do not have 5G. So one of the key things that as Africa we also need to learn is how, or we need to do, is how to make sure that our power or our energy is sustainable, is reliable, availability is high, and we are able to provide it. And then finally is the business case for 5G. I think that when it comes to the business case of 5G, we cannot learn from other regions. We need to look within our context and develop what fits our context. That will be the only thing that I think we cannot learn. And as I mentioned earlier, our context is to look at the B2B solutions. There's a lot of growth in business that is coming in Africa. We have a lot of entrepreneurs. We have more entrepreneurs in Africa than anywhere else. And so we need to look at that business case of the B2B for 5G, leveraging it for industrialization. So yeah, Thomas, that will be it.
All right, thank you, Doma. So, I think one of our panelists touched on this, leveraging 5G for industrialization. So, looking more at the B2B case and developing what fits our context here in Africa. But then it's also good to know, I think Kenichi also touched on this, we should look at 5G as a resource and not as a cash cow, as has been the case. Yeah. Looking at technicality, and I think Michael also mentioned looking at having a shared infrastructure to help us accelerate the development of 5G in Africa. And it's interesting, power stability has come in, I think, a few times in this, which is a big issue in Africa. We have abundance of sun. We could look into sustainable energy, because as rightly mentioned and Thelma, that 5G is energy intensive. So you look at sustainable energy to ensure that we have that constant connectivity, and our businesses, our individuals are always connected, because we can't have Africa move into a digital economy and not have sustainable power. So thank you for that. At this point, I have one question for all of you to answer. But before that, I mentioned to our audience that we have a guest speaker to talk about 5G simulation solutions. So at this point, I would like to introduce Lou Major. So Lou is the CEO of Answers Rwanda. He works closely with a local team of application support engineers, channel partners, and academic sales team and marketing professionals to grow the Answers ecosystem across the African continent with the goal of helping customers reduce time to market, increase revenue while minimizing risk. So it's interesting to also note that Lou is also a US Navy Reserve veteran. So Lou, welcome.
Thank you, Thomas. Thanks for having me. Just one correction: I'm not the CEO. I'm the managing director.
The managing director. Okay, all right. Thank you.
So I'm gonna try to share something here. So this is my first time using this platform. So let me share the screen. Hopefully, it will ask me which screen I wish to share. Okay, and it's that one. Okay, please tell me when you're able to see my screen.
Yeah, nothing. Nothing yet.
Are you able to see now?
No, no, there's nothing.
Okay, it says I'm sharing. I'm going to turn off my camera up. I think we might have it now.
Yeah, here we go. Yeah.
Okay, so again, I'm Lou Major, Managing Director of our ANSYS office here in Kigali, Rwanda. We opened here last September. It's our first office on the continent. Very glad to be here in Rwanda. Very glad to join all of you today. Just to give you a little bit about ANSYS, and I'm trying to, there we go. Okay, so we're the industry leader in simulation. One of the things that I heard was, what are the use cases? And I just kind of jotted down some of the use cases for 5G, just based on some customers that we've worked with over the years. So you have things like healthcare. We actually work with physicians, and it uses 5G technology to do things like take one of the diagnostic images from an actual patient to do things like 3D print parts, like a lady had a titanium jawbone 3D printed. We use it in the cardiac space, where you take a cardiac ultrasound and you can actually practice the technique that you're going to use on that patient before you actually do it live, and you can use simulation to kind of predict the outcome of that surgery. We use 5G in autonomous vehicles, whether there be drones or land vehicles. Use it in manufacturing, robotics, robotic assembly lines, education. You know, you all know the speed of 5G makes e-learning a heck of a lot easier, especially in today's environment where, you know, we don't know when we're all going to get shut in again. So that makes those communications and that e-learning a lot better for people. And then you go to things like smart cities, where there are just a host of applications available, like fleet tracking. You know, you have trucks out there doing things. You can actually track those fleets live using this technology. So we're the industry leader in simulation. We're the gold standard, and simulation is all we do. That's our core business. That's what we do, and we've uniquely positioned ourselves for growth. As I stated, we're the gold standard. We partner with a lot of companies like Red Bull Racing, Ferrari, Cummins, Carnegie Mellon University. So we do partner with universities. We maintain an open ecosystem to make our platform pretty much agnostic to other simulation tools. so that people are able to get the most out of their simulations. I just wanted to show the link here to our 5G ebook. And I do have one quick question. Kenichi, I know you're part of GSMA, and I just wanted to know if you will be here in Rwanda for the GSMA, the MWC in October.
Yes.
So I'd like to make a point for us to meet. We will be supporting there. So please stop by and let's chat a little bit.
That's fine.
So when we look at 5G, one of the things that I heard today was affordability of hardware for people. If the phone companies decide that they want to make an affordable 5G device, they can certainly do that. And with ANSYS software, we go from the smallest of applications, chips, all the way up to space, where you can do digital mission engineering and mission prediction. So using this technology, this has been big across the space industry, and there are actually some African space agencies that are using this technology today. One of our most recent has been Uganda. So 5G brings about a whole huge matrix of engineering goals. And with simulation, you're able to achieve those goals a lot quicker. The latency, talked about latency earlier, so we're looking at less than a millisecond on latency. And we don't want those devices, those battery operated devices, to last for an hour or two. So now we're looking at how do we power those things using less than 5 watts. Miniaturization is huge. We don't have the big cell phones like we used to have when they were in a bag. But the same thing comes down to miniaturization of the hardware that's out there, antennas, all of the infrastructure to get the signals out there. Simulation is used to actually decide where do you put that infrastructure to make sure that you have the best coverage because when you're spending capital to put in cell phone towers or things of that nature, you don't want to get it wrong. You can't get it wrong. You can't afford to get it wrong. So simulation can help to make sure you get that done right. What we've seen using simulation, 5 times performance increase in antennas, weight reduction, 80% weight reduction, which is paramount when you're talking about placing hardware high up on different types of infrastructure, whether it be a cell phone tower up on a building, and then the time and cost. If you can get your product to market quicker, it's better for the consumer and it's better for the company too. When we look at the different types of simulations that are available for 5G using ANSYS software, this is just it's a pretty busy slide to look at. But 5G and 6G touch a lot of things, or will touch a lot of things, and we're able to simulate many of those things from the more minute all the way up to things, like I said, like spacecraft. If we look at how we best address things like cell phone coverage, because I know that's a big one to get people involved in the digital economy, we can actually do, or our tools can be used to do simulation, indoor channel modeling, to make sure that within an office building or within an office itself, how do all of the cell phones and all of the things using 5G within that office, how do they react with one another? Many people don't think about the number of antennas that you have just in your simple cell phone, or it's simple to us nowadays, but you have literally 8 or 9 different antennas in your cell phone. So how do those all do their job without interfering with one another. And then couple that with being in an office with 25 people, and everyone has at least one cell phone, if not two. And then throw in computers, iPads, different other wireless equipment. You have a pretty dense electromagnetic signal in a pretty confined space. And then you take that to the outer world. When I talked about where do you place your antennas, have things that are going to interfere with them, buildings, let's say. One of the challenges we have here in Rwanda that we're talking about helping to address is our topography here is very hilly. So we have a lot of perceived to be dead spots. So we need to be sure that infrastructure is going in places where the people in the valleys are getting the coverage that the people who are more elevated are getting. Then things that a lot of people don't think about. You have that tower sitting out there, and now it's a real windy day. How do we make sure that that tower is not eventually going to fall over? How do those towers react in different temperature environments? We actually use simulation to do things like that as well. We want to make sure that you have this tall, slender structure with this antenna array sitting on top, and you have, a good windy day. We want to make sure that we know that pole is going to flex, but we want to make sure that those antennas don't come off. And what happens to the signal that those antennas put out when that pole is moving? So those are all the types of things that we can simulate to make sure that we have the most robust system possible. And then this is just a quick matrix of things that we're able to test for using simulation. And I think as Africa continues to develop into the 5G and 6G space, I think there is a very viable place for simulation to help in this transformation and to improve the opportunities for success. And we're here on the continent. I'm excited to be here to speak with you all today. And I'm just looking for ways and opportunities that ANSYS can help with the work that's being done on the continent right now. And so that's all I had prepared for today. And I appreciate everyone giving me this opportunity to speak to you.
Thank you very much, Lou. Yeah, I think for Michael in your space, and in fact, even Kenichi and Thelma, I guess Lou is someone you might want to get in touch with in terms of what you're trying to do in 5G space. But now I have a question for all four of you. So the question may have been answered in some way or the other by some of our speakers, but then we spoke about 5G. Let's talk about 6G in the future. Now, how can Africa prepare for 6G in wireless communication? So maybe I'll start with Kenichi.
Mhm. Okay. Yeah. No. Thanks a lot. So when it comes to 6G, I think the very first thing to at least let our audience know is that it's not imminent. Okay. So we're not exactly pushing for 6G to commence immediately. As a matter of fact, even for the tech leaders, the South Koreas, Japans, Chinas, and the rest, they don't expect 6G commercialization to start, anytime before the end of the decade, maybe 2028, 2029 at the earliest. Otherwise, 6G is mainly going to be a, 2030s technology. However, that doesn't mean we should fold our arms. And I think that's why your question is very pertinent. How should we prepare, for 6G? We obviously should, begin to think about it. And the very first thing to note, is that right now, Africa, is one continent where most markets, pretty much all markets, still have um, all the previous generations running, and now we have 5G, right? So you've got 2G, 3G, 4G, and 5G, four generations running in markets that have already launched 5G. We should begin to think, about rationalizing these networks. Okay, we've seen network rationalization, gather momentum in other regions, with the decommissioning of legacy networks, 3G networks, and also 2G networks. Okay, so before the end of the decade, we would expect many countries in Africa to have gotten to the point where they will be able to rationalize, or sunset the legacy networks. That is going to free up a lot of resources that can now be channeled towards next generation networks, 4G, 5G, of course, and then eventually 6G. That is one, way to prepare. The second way to prepare, would be to, pretty much look at what the technology leaders out there are doing. Different countries, the US, China, South Korea, Japan, they've all announced 6G roadmaps. And it's not just developed markets. India, India's economy can be compared in so many ways to several economies in Africa. But India, has announced, ambitious 6G preparation plans. So, governments in Africa should begin to ask themselves, what is 6G? How is it going to be different from what we already have? What do we need to put in place, both from an infrastructure perspective, importantly, from a skills perspective, right? How do we begin to train our students in schools to be ready to take advantage of this technology when it eventually comes? What impact will this technology have on the enterprise segment? How can we begin to prepare our enterprises, our manufacturing companies, our health, institutions, and the rest of them, to be able to leverage this technology when it eventually comes? Of course, we can't talk about any mobile technology without thinking about spectrum, right? So what spectrum will be required, for this technology? How do we make sure the spectrum is available, okay, and can be assigned, in a sustainable way to operators, so that they will be able to deploy this technology at the right time. So these are questions that governments, across the region can be asking themselves in preparation, for the eventual, there's a term that I like to use in my reports when I talk about, 5G, 6G. They may not be imminent in Africa, but the fact that they are wireless technologies mean that they are inevitable. So they're going to happen one day, right? And you don't really have to wait until 2030, 2035 before you begin to prepare for it. You can at least begin to get your policymakers, get your industries, get your entire digital system, digital ecosystem aware that this is going to happen in the future. And now is the time to begin to put in place the building blocks that would ensure that when that time comes, it will happen in a sustainable and commercially viable way.
All right. Thanks, Kenichi. So it means, as you said, it's imminent. It may not happen now, maybe the 2030s, but it's imminent. So it's good that we prepare in terms of looking at our infrastructure, preparing that for 6G, looking at the skills that we need to upgrade for 6G. Also looking at
Yeah.
what other tech leaders are doing globally. You spoke about what India plans to have for 6G, learning from that and seeing what we can import to help us prepare as well, and making sure the spectrum is available. That's quite critical, because without the spectrum, you can't really roll out. So thanks to that, Kenichi. Michael, what's your take on this? How do you
So
prepare?
that's obviously very mind inquisitive question as we discuss how we want to spearhead Africa to 5G, what we will do about 6G. But I just think that actually 6G is important. There are a couple of aspects that I think African industry and regulators have to be really on top, driving the ITU, driving the 3GPP, driving GSMA and GMN and other organizations. And these are the areas of, to me, is the affordability and sustainability. So both of these topics are very important. You know, energy consumption is very high, energy costs are very high, and they're big part of the network costs overall, which actually put a burden on the affordability of technology in general. So that's, I think, very important subject that the two subjects to me that African regulators, African organizations, African industry should have a voice in working through, flavor of different organizations to build the mechanisms that the specific issues are addressed. Obviously, there's use cases, but overall, I think energy and affordability of technology are the critical pieces, because maybe they're more affordable 5G, maybe 6G will come faster, maybe 5G will be struggling, but ultimately costs are everything. And to me, these are the key two topics that probably should be addressed by the African industry and African regulators. Overall, I think they also the not just this harmonization of the spectrum, but also the best business practices have to be also analyzed in advance and disseminated to the for the industry and regulators, because they will provide the best practices, whether there's traditional ways of doing telecom, or it's going to be more disaggregated, such as ORAN, which obviously works on a lot of new very advanced technologies for AI and better and new ways of implement the technology in the cloud, and the cloud native technologies are very important as well. So all of this plethora of ideas, I think, should be looked in advance to make sure that the 6G deployment actually going smooth or adopted faster than 5G.
Yes, thanks. So, for faster adoption, you will need to look at affordability, making sure it's affordable, but also key sustainability, which is something we also touched on earlier, especially in case of energy, where we need sustainable energy to power, the 5G, 6G, etc. So thanks for that. Thelma, what's your take on this?
Thank you, Thomas. I think Michael and Kenichi has said it all. I just want to add that this gives us, the fact that it's not imminent, gives us the opportunity for once not to play catch up as Africa. So we know that it's coming. It's not here yet, but we know it's coming. And so the first thing that comes to mind is we need to invest in research and R&D. Let's not wait and then we take what the US has done, the China has done. They have done it in their context. They have done it to suit their culture, their geography, and what they want, their priorities. So I think government needs to invest in R&D in this, as since we have quite well. I've also learned that 8 years of it's not a lot. It's not a lot of time, but yeah, we have some leeway, so we can leverage on that. The other thing is we need to make sure that we are not increasing the digital divide. The ITU, Smart Africa, all these digital organizations are working hard to close the digital divide. But as next generation technologies come, we are seeing that it has the potential to erode all the benefits that we have had. So, and that comes to what Michael had said in terms of affordability. And at the heart of this divide is affordability. And so the second thing on making it, ensuring that we don't have digital divide, I think, is to reposition our thinking on how we treat it. When we started, GSM, it was 1G, 2G, and so we had to think a certain way. But now, voice has gone down, it's more data, and the technology has changed. And the business model also has to change. The regulatory model has to change. The mindset has to change. And I think we spoke about tech neutrality, we spoke about how regulators should handle even the spectrum fees, for instance, looking at it as a digital good rather than something that is a cash cow, for instance. So these are some of the things that we need to look at: the new ways of regulation, investing in R&D, looking at digital divide in terms of the affordability. And for me, context is very important. The use cases. The fact that the US or the China is using it for something else doesn't mean we should use it for the same thing. And so investing in the R&D is very important for us to know what our use case is as Africans. I always use this example of a cashless society. In the cashless society of the West, it's more on the card. But for Africa, it's our Momo that we know. And it's very contextual and it works for us. So we need to make sure that we also have something that is contextual as we wait and prepare for 6G.
Thank you, Thomas. So, I mean, it's important that we invest in R&D and make sure we do it in our own context. And there's a good example you gave about Newcastle society, where the West is basically cars and here is Mumu. So we've actually tried to drive a cashless society used based on our own context using mobile money. So we need to bear that in mind if we want to look at 6G, and it gives us opportunity not to play catch up like we're doing now. So at least we have enough time to do our research and make sure that we are ready to fully take advantage of 6G. So thank you, Thelma. Lou, since you're on, what's your take on this? How do you think Africa can prepare for 6G? Sorry, Lou, you're mute.
I said I wanted to say I'm new to Momo and I love it. Thelma took probably all of my thunder. I was going to say, don't wait, don't be a consumer of the technology, be a pioneer of the technology, and that's one of the things that we're trying to do here in Rwanda, starting with the universities. There's no reason why. China and the U.S. and South Korea, they do have a head start right now on 6G, and actually, I know companies that are doing development all the way up into the 10G spectrum. I don't know what the use cases would be for something that fast, but I agree. Create your own path for 6G and for your own purposes, and don't wait. And start it with the universities, and we're introducing simulation to the country here to have more people using simulation instead of a lot of people leaving the continent using simulation in their undergrad and their graduate work in other countries off the continent, then coming back and not having access to it. So the access is here, and I think that's where the country, or the different countries, the continent can kind of close that gap by starting to do their own development of the higher spectrums. And that's basically everything Thelma said. I agree with.
Okay, so we need to create our own path. And I like that statement. Don't be a consumer, be a pioneer. So that's something that we need to do here in Africa.
Yes.
So thank you, everyone. So at this point, I think I can see there are a couple of questions from our audience. I know time is fast spent. So we'll take the first question, which is, what does the process of sunsetting 2G and 3G look like to free up spectrum for 5G? I think Thelma, you mentioned that. I think Kenichi also spoke about that. I think Kenichi in reference to neutrality. So I don't know, maybe Thelma, if you can take this.
Yes. So the process is basically trying to migrate users or traffic from 2G to 3G, or maybe users or traffic from 2G and 3G to 4G. So let's take the scenario of 2G to 3G. The good thing is 3G is also able to handle voice. So basically, is to switch off your 2G equipment and move all traffic to 3G. But that means that you need to ensure that most of your users are having 3G capable handsets. Otherwise, you cut them off. That's the very basic explanation in very simple English that I can give. There's also the one of sunsetting from 2G 3G to 4G, and it's the same process basically. Then once you have been able to switch those equipment off, the frequency is now free for you to reuse in other places. But then we spoke about tech neutrality. If we had tech neutrality, the MNOs can then decide that, okay, in this area, because it's rural, more people are using 2G, so I'm going to leave that the 2G over there. But in this other area, which is, let's say, the urban, I don't need 2G there. So whilst I have 2G in the rural areas, let me switch off my 2G in the urban areas and use that frequency for 5G or whatever G it is. So, and that is the beauty and why we are preaching tech neutrality. It also reduces the cost for the barrier of entry in terms of cost for the internet service provider. Kenichi, I don't know if you wanted to add something.
No, I think you've covered it all, as far as sunsetting legacy networks is concerned. Thanks, Delma.
So, Mike or Lou, you add anything to this?
Not from me. Obviously, I think Telma said it pretty well. I think sunsetting is important, though in Africa still 2G and 3G play a considerable role. But as devices readily become available, or the policy will enable a faster transition of the consumers to 4G and 5G technology. So this network and spectrum needs to be refarmed actually to enable 5G or 6G potentially, and that's the process that I think should take place and we discuss as part of the preparation for the 6G adoption.
Thank you. So, next question. What are some security concerns with 5G and how can we mitigate them? Who would like to go first? Maybe Kenichi, since you're with GSMA.
Yeah, sure. So I wouldn't necessarily, say there are security threats that are specific, to 5G. There are security threats that affect the digital ecosystem as a whole. I mean, the CrowdStrike situation last week, I think it's a clear example of that, so from cyber attacks, to supply chain vulnerabilities, to privacy, concerns, to IoT vulnerabilities. These threats remain there in the digital world, and just as previous generations 2G 3G 4G have been susceptible to these threats, so is 5G. But the good thing, is that the industry continues to work hard, to find ways to mitigate these threats, and the GSMA is pretty much at the forefront of doing that. We have got, different teams within the GSMA that run various programs that seek to identify new threats, mitigate existing threats, and pretty much keep both the networks and the users take efforts to keep both the networks and the users safe. And I must say also, that mobile operators are members of these groups. We have quite a number of groups. One of them, for example, is what in the GSMA we call the Fraud and Security Group, the FASG, and they continue to bring stakeholders from across the digital ecosystem, mobile operators, equipment vendors, and other players within the ecosystem, of course, device manufacturers, to find ways to address whatever security threats, that networks generally face.
The next question, I think this will go to Michael, since you touched on that. Some consumers with older devices may need to upgrade to newer models that support 4G, LTE, or 5G. How can we address affordability of handsets for 5G? Michael?
Well, that's a great question. There is not an easy way, in my view, to address the affordability of 5G. The easiest, so the quantities, obviously dictate the prices. So larger procurements make lower prices, but I think the way would be probably either to align with large procurements such as, for example, Reliance in India, which obviously buys in large quantities, or for the African operators actually to get together and create the alliance in which they would be able to procure devices and dictate the prices on the market. If Reliance can do it in India, or big operators can do it because they procure large quantity of devices, so does African operators can do it. Africa is a big market, 1.4 million people, so 1.4 billion people, and so the assets fractured, but obviously it is a huge consumer market, and working together that can actually dictate affordability, in my view. So that is, I think, where it's important to address in 5G. Maybe it's more important to address toward 4G. And I just want to answer the previous question as well, about the security. Look, hands down, 5G or 4G is more secure than 2G, 3G, and 4G. Obviously there can be some security issues, but 5G is inherently more secure. It's done through a variety of means that's built in the protocol, but it's mutual authentication capabilities and subscriber identity and some other security mechanisms. So obviously the 5G in itself, is considerably better from security perspective than 2G and 3G and 4G, and actually faster deployment of the 5G technology would improve the threats that are facing the cyber threats that a lot of MNOs facing and spending a lot of money trying to address for the legacy technology.
Okay, Thomas, if you don't mind, I'll just add one line or two to the handset affordability, 5G handset affordability question. It's something I'm very passionate about, and we do a lot of work at the GSMA. But just want to call out very quickly three possible solutions. One of them, and we have seen some countries, the likes of Kenya, push that, is local manufacturing, domestic manufacturing, right? So when this happens, if you look at the cost of a device, if you can break it down to the ex-factory cost, you can add the distribution cost, you can add the shipping cost and the rest, and then very importantly, when it comes to Africa, you add the duties, the tariffs that these devices incur when they are imported into the country. We know that it's going to be a difficult argument to get many governments across the region to remove duties on devices, because that's an important source of revenue, for governments. But what we have seen is that in some countries, they're pushing for domestic manufacturing, and this has the potential to create jobs locally, avoid, duties and taxes, and of course, significantly reduce the shipping cost, because you're not having to bring these devices all the way, from China. So that's one. The second one is refurbished devices. We shouldn't I would say underestimate the potential this has, to make devices affordable. In developed markets, device replacement cycles range between 2 and maybe 3 4 years thereabout. So what it means, is that when people upgrade to newer devices, we have tons and tons of used devices out there, many of them still in very good working conditions. Now, with governments around the world becoming very, very conscious about e-waste, okay, we're beginning to see a strong case, for proper device refurbishments, which could make, used devices very attractive to people who may not be able to afford brand new devices. But of course, there's a process that needs, to happen between when it leaves the old user to when it's ready and repackaged, for a new user, to take it on board. So we're going to hear a lot more, around refurbishing and recycling of used devices. And then the final point is on device financing. Paying upfront for a brand new phone is going to be really too much for many users. $200, $150, $300, depending on the price. That is something a lot of people will struggle, to do. But we have seen successful cases of device financing, where people can pay for those same devices in installments, which is more manageable, supposed to bringing out the upfront cost to pay at once. So those are, I think 3 things that we should keep an eye on, and these may make 5G handsets more affordable for users. Yeah, thanks.
So,
I'll
Thomas,
just,
I just
I'd like to
if you
add one
allow,
more thing.
sorry, Lou. Go ahead, Lou.
No, you go first.
Okay, so just wanted to add to what Kenichi had mentioned, and Michael had mentioned it for an alliance, and I just wanted to confirm that there is a smartphone alliance, together with GSMA, the likes of the Nokias, the Vodafones, the Qualcomms, at the global level, and what we are looking at is what Kenichi has mentioned, but also we are looking at if you take a smartphone, beyond the distribution cost, beyond the logistics cost, the apps on them, do we need them? If you take your smartphone, I bet you're using only 10% of the apps on them, but it has a lot of apps on the smartphone. And all these apps, especially when they are pre-installed, adds to the cost of the smartphone. Then and apart from that, it also then adds to the RAM, the memory, the memory size that has to be used for the smartphone. So we are going down to these details because we don't want to promote just feature phones for everybody. We want to promote smartphone, proper smartphone. So how can we make a proper Samsung or a proper iPhone affordable for the average African? That's what we are discussing. And if we look at these details, we'll be able to reduce the cost, and of course, leveraging device financing, leveraging other modules, we would be now able to bring phones to the average citizen so that everybody is included in the digital transformation. So that's just the bit I wanted to add to what Kenichi had said.
Thank you, Lou.
And the last thing I wanted to add was last year at the Mobile World Congress here in Kigali, Airtel launched like an incentive where people could get a smartphone at a very, very low cost. And it came with internet service as well as voice. And then MTN soon followed that same special. I don't know if it was something specific for Rwanda or if they were doing it across all of Africa. But that program does exist here locally, where people are able to get smartphones at a very, very, very reasonable price.
Thank you very much. I know the audience have a whole lot of questions, but we're nearly almost 2 hours, and we've actually gone beyond the time for this webinar. So unfortunately, we'll have to wrap up. But what we can do is, audience, you can still send me your questions. We can channel it to our speakers today, and we can sort of do some kind of like summary answers and have a post online that you can get your information from. So on that note, I want to thank you, Thelma, Kenichi, Michael, Lou, for sharing your insights on 5G. I mean, we know that Africa has about 3 million people currently connected to 5G, and about 16 countries have 5G in Africa, or have rolled out 5G in Africa. But we need to accelerate the pace of this, because globally, we expect that about 60% of the global population will be 5G users in 2028, and Africa should not lag behind that. We should be part of that 60%. We should be heavily represented in that 60%. So there's so many areas we need to look at in terms of affordability of devices, and also the cost of rolling out 5G, and also looking at our policies. How then do we change our mindsets from seeing the spectrum as a cash cow, and looking at something that's going to generate value for our respective countries and for the continent in the long term. So these are things that we need to be thinking of as citizens of this continent, and as we look at how we can accelerate Africa's digital transformation into a digital economy. So on that note, I want to thank you all for making time to participate in this webinar, for sharing your insights. And to our audience, thank you for your time. This recording will be available on our YouTube and our LinkedIn channels for those who missed parts of it, so you can always go back and catch up on that. So thank you, everyone, and I wish you all a great weekend. Thank you, and goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Africa is on the fast road to economic progress. At the destination is a burgeoning information and knowledge economy driven by financial inclusion and socio-economic advancement. Powering this progress is Ascend Digital Solutions, an award-winning digital transformation company that is reimagining digital for Africa. Ascend is accelerating progress in Africa's underserved regions and bridging the digital divide by charting a powerful digital roadmap underpinning economic growth, blending strong, innovative capabilities with financial and technology expertise, enhancing existing digital infrastructure to accelerate digital prosperity, and promoting diverse programs that drive localized and meaningful connectivity on the continent. We are rapidly becoming a representative of Africa's true digital sovereignty. Our rural wireless network program is providing data and voice services to 3.4 million citizens in rural Ghana. We are offering neutral, shared digital platforms, mobile applications, and security services that empower MNOs and government enterprises. Our joint venture, Digital Infrastructure Ventures, is enabling the delivery of our e-transformation solutions through high-speed wireless broadband, 4G, 5G services steered by a super information highway with 100 gigabits per second backbone, secure SD-WAN solutions that accelerate time to market, and express connectivity of 50 to 100 megabits per second connecting metropolitan and district assemblies, post offices, hospitals, and the police service. Ascend Digital Solutions is setting up high-capacity, seamless, and secure nationwide broadband infrastructure that will drive entrepreneurship and a high-skilled economy. We are creating tremendous opportunities in next-generation technologies, which will enable the delivery of robotics, autonomous driving, artificial intelligence, and machine learning. Ascend's digital infrastructure subsidiary, Smart Infraco, is a technical partner of the National Information Technology Agency under the Ministry of Communications and Digitalization, Ghana. We are redefining the state of digital play in Ghana by bringing seamless connectivity to Ghana's public institutions and agencies, helping MNOs and ISPs deliver advanced data and voice services by leveraging the Government of Ghana's world-class digital infrastructure backbone. Tier 3 data center with secondary backup, disaster recovery, and low latency. over 1,000 kilometers of fiber optic cabling along the eastern corridor of Ghana, the largest government-built WAN infrastructure supported by Metro Fiber and nationwide 4G LTE TDD 2.6 GHz FWA, providing high-speed broadband connectivity, managed IT infrastructure services, cloud and cybersecurity solutions. Ascend Digital Solutions and Smart InfraCo are enabling next-generation technologies in Africa, with Ghana as the digital playground. We're building a booming African economy and closing in on the vision of holistic digital empowerment. Join us as we unlock the full potential of digital technologies and transform Africa into the world's largest digital economy.